Let's be seated. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. I think we told you early on that there may be some legal issues that might necessitate you being excused to the jury room. Well, they came up before you even left the jury room. So we were busy discussing a number of issues prior to going back on the record. Your patience has allowed us to address those, and so that it should actually make the rest of the afternoon flow a little bit quicker. And so I think, again, thank you for your patience. We are now ready to resume with our witnesses. Attorney Lassay, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state will call Deputy Nicholas Nerat.
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Deputy Nicholas R. Laird, N-E-R-A-T.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Attorney Saunders, go ahead.
Can you state for the record how you're currently employed?
I'm a patrolman at the Brown County Sheriff's Office, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And how long have you been employed in that capacity?
I worked for the jail prior for about a year, and I've been on the road between 6 and 7 years.
And specifically directing your attention to May 21st of 2016, were you employed as a patrol deputy on that date?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall whether or not you were on duty on that day?
Yes, I was.
As part of your employment on that date, were you made aware of a body that was located in the village of Bellevue?
Correct. In our shift briefing, approximately 9:45, Lieutenant Bain came into our briefing room and advised that there had been a body found under suspicious circumstances that was unclothed.
And at that point, were you involved in any way in the investigation?
Not at that point, no.
And at a certain point later on, did you become involved?
Not during the shift, no.
And at the end of your shift on, this would be May 22nd of 2016, do you recall speaking with Deputy Dow?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe generally the nature of that conversation?
I bumped into him in the debriefing room, spoke with him regards his shift, which he had worked a double shift dealing with the case that Lieutenant Bain advised earlier. And I had asked him if there was any information that came that they were letting out to deputies other than the press conference that was had, the information that was given out then. And he advised that there was a photo that he had of the suspected victim and a male subject, and that it was being passed in case, because that's what they believe the victim's last known clothing was, in case anyone had come across that during their shift.
And you did have the opportunity to view that photograph?
Yes, I did.
Again, this conversation was at the end of your shift on May 22nd, correct?
Correct.
After that, did you return home?
Yes, I headed home.
And what direction did you take to go home?
I exited the sheriff's office parking lot, east on Development Drive, turned north onto County Highway GV, and then the on-ramp to 172 westbound.
And at that point, did you observe anything of note?
Yeah, at first I thought it was what appeared to be a dead animal on the right side of the road, heading up the ramp onto 172 westbound. When I got closer, I noticed it was what appeared to be a pile of clothes or a clothing item on the right side of the road.
May I approach on?
Go right ahead.
Deputy, I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 24. Are you able to recognize what that is?
Yes, that's the clothing that I observed on the side of the on-ramp.
I'm sorry, that's a photograph of that clothing you observed?
Correct.
And based on your recollection of that morning, is that a fair and accurate depiction of the clothing you observed?
Yes, it is.
And about what time did you observe this clothing at?
I'd say approximately 5:45 a.m., maybe 5:50 a.m.
On May 22nd?
Correct.
Did you stop to observe the clothing closer?
I did not stop at that time. By the time I got to the clothing, I was already near highway speeds, and didn't really recollect what it was until a little bit down the road, or what I thought it could be.
And did you report your observations?
Yes, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles up the road, I thought that I better contact the shift lieutenant to see if anyone on duty could check in case it was in fact the clothing from the victim that I'd observed earlier in the photo. So I contacted the shift lieutenant's desk and relayed my observations to Lieutenant Perry.
Move for the admission of number 24, Your Honor, at this time.
Subject to cross, any objection to 24? No. 24 is received.
And I have no further questions.
Cross?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Officer, you may be excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Statement call its next witness.
Call Lieutenant James Valley.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
James Valley, Valley.
Whenever you're ready.
Can you state for the record how you're currently employed?
Sure. Lieutenant, Brown County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been employed specifically as a lieutenant?
Approximately 4 years.
And do you have other law enforcement experience?
I do.
Can you describe that?
I worked for Door County Sheriff's Office for approximately 15 years, and Two Rivers Police Department for approximately 4 years.
And could you briefly describe some of your duties as a patrol lieutenant, or sorry, as a lieutenant?
Sure. I'm currently in charge of our Internet Crimes Against Children Division, and I also assist in our General Investigative Division.
And directing your attention to May of 2016, were you involved in the investigation into the death of Nicole Vanderheiden?
I was.
And how did you become to be involved in that case?
On May 21st of 16, I was contacted by Lieutenant Perry. He advised me that a body was found on Huffman Road near Bellevue Street, and asked if I could respond and also have some investigators come in.
And do you recall what time approximately you got to the scene?
I believe I arrived at approximately 3:50 hours.
And at that point, what were your responsibilities on scene?
At that time, it was still a new scene. I coordinated crime scene logs to make sure we had an inner perimeter and outer perimeter. I also advised Investigator Lopnow of that he is going to be one of the lead investigators on the scene, and then I started coordinating interviews at the scene.
And again, this was on May 21st of 2016?
Yes.
Later on, May 22nd of 2016, did you assist in a search warrant at a residence?
I did.
Where was that residence located?
I believe it was 2923 Berkeley Road.
And through the course of your investigation, did you learn whose residence this was?
Yes, it was Nicole Vanderheiden and Doug Deputies.
And what was your role in the execution of the search warrant?
I was there to coordinate the search warrant, but I was also there to be a liaison between the Green Bay Police Department, who was collecting the evidence and assisting us, and the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
Can you describe what you mean by evidence liaison?
Sure. To coordinate between both agencies, if one of our officers from the Sheriff's Office found something, I would coordinate with the Green Bay Police Department to collect that item. So we had proper communication between both agencies.
And again, what time was this search warrant executed at?
I believe we approached the residence approximately at 2:17 in the morning, and we executed around 2:30.
And were there other officers with you during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes.
Do you recall who?
I believe there was Lieutenant Kevin Kennard, narcotics investigator Jeff Brand, narcotics investigator Nick Olmstead.
And,
amongst others.
sorry. And can you describe generally for us the residence that was the subject of the search warrant?
Sure. It was a two-story residence with a two-car attached garage. The lower half had a bathroom, a living room area, and a kitchen area, along with appeared to be like a family area. Upstairs had a bedroom and a bathroom, and I believe there was maybe another bedroom upstairs.
And as evidence liaison, are you aware of the areas of the house which were searched?
I was there to, yes, I was there to coordinate if someone found something to let Green Bay Police Department know.
And any evidentiary, who collected any evidentiary items that were located, that were of value in the residence?
The Green Bay Police Department.
When you got to the residence at about 2:17 a.m., was anyone in the residence?
Yes, it was Doug Dietrich's mother and father, along with his son.
Was Douglas Dietrich there at that time?
He was not.
Do you know where Doug was at that time?
I believe he was at the sheriff's office.
Do you know why?
He was being talked to with the disappearance of Nicole Vanderheiden.
Later on, May 22nd, do you recall being dispatched to the area around 172 in GV?
I do.
And what was the reason for that dispatch?
I was advised by Lieutenant Perry that some clothes have been found on 172 westbound near Highway GV.
Did you respond at that time?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately what time that was?
I believe that was at 6:50 in the morning.
And were any other deputies with you at that time?
Yes, I believe Officer Todd Prohaska and Officer Rusk.
And when you got to that area, I guess first of all, can you describe where in the area of Highway 172 and GV you responded to?
Sure. Highway GV runs north and south near the overpass of 172. You would want to go west towards the Green Bay Airport. So you would travel up the ramp going west, and the clothes that we recovered were just, I guess, past the on-ramp onto the highway.
And did you and other deputies eventually search that area?
Yes.
And did you locate any items of evidentiary value?
Yes, I located, first located a shirt, some pants. Inside the pants, I observed underwear, which appeared to have blood stains on the underwear. I also located a bra that was along the edge of the highway. I would say the edge would be between the pavement and where the grass starts. The other officers located a shoe along with a purse and a lanyard in the ditch area.
And did you collect photographs of the items you located?
I did take photographs, yes.
And were those items later collected and logged into evidence?
They were.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Go right ahead.
Lieutenant, first I'm going to show you what's previously been marked Exhibit 4. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
What is that?
That'd be the shirt and pants with the underwear inside on the roadway.
And that is accurate to what you observed on May 22nd?
It is.
I'm also going to show you it's been marked as Exhibits 25 through 32. Could you identify what each of those documents are?
Sure. Exhibit 25 is, again, a closer picture of the shirt and pants with the underwear inside the pants along the roadway. Exhibit 26 is a close-up, again, of those items, the shirt and the pants and the underwear. Exhibit 27 is a close-up of the pants with, you can see the underwear inside with the blood stain on the underwear. Exhibit 28 is the bra along the, women's bra along the edge of the roadway. Exhibit 29 is Deputy Prohaska pointing to a shoe in correlation. He's pointing down to a shoe with a flashlight. It's in correlation from where the roadway is to where the shoe is inside in the ditch. Exhibit 30 is a shoe in the ditch. Exhibit 31 is a lanyard that says Nicole Vanderheiden on it, as in a picture on a blue background. And Exhibit 32 is a white purse.
And again, all of those exhibits fairly and accurately depict the scene and the items you observed on May 22nd.
Yes.
I'd move for the admission of exhibits 25 through 32 at this time.
Subject to cross, any objection to those exhibits being admitted?
No, Judge, thank you.
All right. Exhibits 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32 are received.
And then permission to publish each in succession on the overhead camera.
We're going to use the big screen.
Yes.
Permission granted.
So Lieutenant, is this exhibit 24?
Yes, it is.
And again, that would be the clothing sort of looking in the middle of the photo, maybe a little north of center, to the right of the white fog line.
Yes, between the fog line and the grass line.
This is exhibit 25, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's just a closer view of the clothing you observed?
Yes, it is.
Is that exhibit 26?
Yes.
Exhibit 27 is now on screen.
Yes.
For the record, can you describe exhibit 27?
Sure. It's a pair of pants with underwear inside, appear to be stained blood.
And did you observe that same blood when you physically observed the item?
Yes.
And this is item 28. Can you describe what's being depicted in this photograph?
Sure. The pink item along the grass line is the women's bra that was found in the area.
Now looking at exhibit 29, can you explain what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes, that's Deputy Prohaska pointing down to a shoe, straight down from where the flashlight is, in correlation from where I'm standing on the roadway, and he's in the ditch.
Do you know, or do you recall where on the roadway you're standing at this point?
Sure, I'm standing right at the grass line.
Now looking at exhibit number 30, can you describe what this depicts?
That would be a shoe.
And that would be, sorry, and that would be the same shoe Deputy Prohaska was pointing at in the previous item?
Yes, sir.
And exhibit number 31 is now being shown on the screen, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you describe what's being depicted now?
Yes, that is a lanyard with a lanyard label of Nicole Vanderheiden with her name on it.
And exhibit number 32 is now being depicted, correct?
Yes, that would be a purse. And
And-
that was found near the lanyard.
Okay. And again, when you were searching the area of 172 and GV for these items, you and other officers did follow proper search protocols?
Yes,
When you handled the items, were you wearing gloves?
we were.
And all of these items, which you just testified to, were ultimately collected and processed into evidence?
Yes,
correct?
each item was bagged separately and collected and put into evidence.
Was that the extent of your involvement on May 22nd with respect to this case?
Later on that morning, approximately 11 o'clock, Mayhew, came in and he wanted his vehicle back. I asked for a Buccal swab at that time, which he consented to, and I took that swab and placed that swab into evidence.
And that was from Greg Matthew, you said?
Greg Matthew, yeah.
Okay. And can you explain briefly for the record what a Buccal swab is?
Sure. Buccal swab is, you would take a Q-tip, a sterilized Q-tip, you'd place that inside their mouth, and it would obtain skin or DNA from their mouth, which you could later submit to compare it to other DNA to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab.
Now, directing your attention to September of 2016, were you also involved in this investigation at that time?
Yes.
Can you describe how?
Sure. On September 7th of 2016, at approximately 6 o'clock in the morning, I was doing surveillance to identify George Burch at a residence on 15th Street in, I believe it's 51215 in the city of Green Bay. At that time, he was a suspect in this case, and we wanted to speak with him. I observed him coming out of his residence. That I've done surveillance on that residence before, watching him. He came out of that residence, got into a red truck, and proceeded westbound on Mason Street in the city of Green Bay. I called other officers for assistance who were already on their way. At, I believe, the intersection of Mason Street and County FF, we did make a traffic stop on that vehicle. I approached the passenger side where George Burch was occupying. I asked him to come out. He identified himself. At that time, Deputy Brighter, Jody Brighter, placed handcuffs on him. I did search Mr. Burch. I located his cell phone and some money. I later gave that to Investigator Slinger for evidence.
And those items, the phone and the money, you located those on Mr. Burch's person?
I did.
And subsequent to that, did you also assist in a search of a residence on that date?
Excuse me for a second.
Take your time.
Yes, later on that day, I assisted on a search warrant where it was the residence that Mr. Burch came out of on 15th Avenue.
And again, this time, during your search, were all the proper search protocols followed?
Yes,
And you were wearing gloves at this time?
yes.
Did you locate anything of evidentiary value at that time?
Yes, I located a box of Maverick cigarettes, which was taken as evidence, and also located a football jersey, which appeared to have a red stain on it, and that was collected as evidence.
After collecting those items as evidence, did you turn them over to another deputy?
Yes, I believe Deputy Burnclaw possibly was the evidence custodian. I'm not quite sure who was at that time.
Another officer submitted.
Another
the
officer submitted the evidence into evidence.
I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
I have no questions, thank you.
Lieutenant Valley, thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
And you're excused.
Thank you.
Next witness. Ms. Kennedy, if you come forward, right up to the witness stand, and then Madam Clerk will swear you in.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Ask J. Kennedy, Kennedy.
Thank you.
You may be seated and just speak close to the microphone whenever you're ready. Attorney Kerrigan Maris, go ahead.
Appreciate it. Oh, Ms. Kennedy.
Are you comfortable? You want to situate the microphone where it feels comfortable?
Okay.
Thanks. I think I keep pointing to that one, but I think it's actually the one in front of you that might be picking up the sound. So thank you. May I ask how old you are?
33.
Have you always lived in this area?
No.
Okay. How long have you lived in the Brown County area?
On and off, a few years. I've been here for about 5 years now, solid.
Okay. And do you have family in the area?
Not immediate area, no.
Okay. Did you know a Nicole Vanderheiden?
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when you met her?
At this point, probably like 3-ish years ago.
Okay. And do you remember where you were when you met?
Mutual friend. I actually walked into her work and was introduced to her. And then through a mutual friend, and then we became friends and started working together.
At some point in time, were you working in a restaurant together?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at some point in time, did you meet Douglas Dietrich?
Never formally introduced, just in passing.
Okay. So, did you know Nicole before you met Douglas Dietrich?
Yes.
And do you call her Nikki?
Yes.
Okay. So, did you become pretty good friends, you and Nikki?
Yeah. Decently good friends, yes.
Did sometimes you care for her child?
Yes.
Were you aware that she had children?
Yes.
And did you know them?
Yes.
Did you babysit all three, or?
Just Dylan.
Okay, and Dylan would be your youngest, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know how often approximately you babysat Dylan?
It was roughly 2 months prior to this incident.
Okay, and the incident would mean Nicole's passing, is that correct?
Correct.
So roughly, if this all took place in May, maybe a couple months before that you babysat?
But I was watching him. I started watching him. Yes.
Now, had that babysitting usually taken place at your residence?
Yes. Always.
Okay. Was there one evening in May of 2016 that you agreed to babysit that you were going to come to Nicole and Douglas's residence?
Yes.
Did you know where they were going that night, if you knew?
The watering hole for a show, concert of some sort. I wasn't familiar with the band itself.
Okay. Did you work elsewhere that night?
I worked that evening, yes.
And would that have been at the restaurant you were working at?
Correct.
Do you remember about what time you got off?
Around 10:30, a little after 10:30.
Okay, and that would be in the evening?
Correct.
Did you know the arrangements? Was someone else watching in the meantime till you got there?
Yes, her mother. I drove to the house and then relieved her mother, who was previously watching Dylan.
Okay, so you stayed in touch with the mother, let her know when you were coming over?
And Nikki, yes.
Okay, and then, do you remember about what time you got to Nicole's house?
She was about 5 minutes from the restaurant. I would say roughly 10:40-ish.
Okay. And Nikki's mom was still there, of course.
Correct.
Did she take off right away?
We exchanged a few words, and I changed out of my work clothes, and then she had taken off, yes.
Okay. So then you took over responsibilities for Dylan, is that correct?
Correct.
Did he sleep for a good portion of that time?
Yes.
It wasn't too tough a duty at that point?
Not at all.
Okay. At some point in time, did Doug Dietrich return to the residence?
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when that was?
Roughly in 2:40 a.m., I was woken up.
Okay. Were you in the living room, a bedroom?
I was sleeping on the long couch.
Okay.
Correct, in the living room.
I take it Dylan was asleep also?
Dylan was asleep in his bassinet upstairs. I had put him upstairs at this point.
Okay. What room was he in?
I believe his room, there was a bassinet and a bed in there, so I believe it was their room, also his room. They'd shared.
So did Doug arrive by himself at this time?
He was with a friend,
Okay. Did you catch that person's name?
Greg.
Had you ever met Greg before?
No.
Now, you had seen a few times Doug Dietrich before this, at
I'd
least?
say about 3 to 4 times with them going out to dinner or just in passing, and he came to pick up Dylan once from my house, so just very brief.
Okay. So did you stay very long after that?
There was conversation, maybe about 20 minutes.
And was Greg still there when you left?
No. Greg had left. In the process of me trying to leave, Greg had wanted to get out of there before I left. He said he needed to get home, and he rushed out the door.
Okay, so they arrived approximately 2:40 a.m., and then Greg left before you did?
Correct. There was conversation with all of us, though, sitting around just trying to figure out where she was or where she could have been.
Okay, so you had become aware that Nikki was obviously not there, correct?
Correct.
And at any point in time, did Doug ask you to do anything to try to find her?
He said to keep calling her, call her phone, and, yeah, keep calling her.
And did you do so?
I did.
Were you successful in contacting her?
No, the phone was off every time. I kept stating that the phone is dead, the phone is off.
Now, could you tell if these two had been drinking when you saw them?
They were out. I mean, I can't say if they were intoxicated. They're very large men, but they were loud and,
Okay.
concerned.
And they seemed concerned to you at this point in time?
Yeah.
Do you know how many times while you were there that you reached out and tried to contact Nicky?
I would say at least 4 times, 3 or 4 times, from my phone, just in conversation, and while we were there talking, I had called.
So you indicated that you made those efforts. At some point in time, did Doug show you some texts that he'd received from Nicky?
He showed me a telephone, and he said that they had gotten in an argument, and this is kind of what it was. And he presented me the phone, and it was a conversation back and forth between a male and a female of obviously a jealousy banter.
Was the phrase something where she's responding to him, go talk to your whores?
Something of the sort, yes. I'm not sure who it came from, but the message was across, like, just go be with your whores, yeah.
And did you indicate when you relayed this information to the police that it looked like Doug was trying to calm her down after this?
I wouldn't say that. I don't know that I've said that.
There was a statement that you gave, this was some time ago. Was it a little easier to remember it then than you do now?
No.
Okay. So you don't...
I don't recall him trying to calm her down. It was just showing me the text message that they got into an argument. I wasn't trying to be involved. I handed him the phone back and was just kind of like, shit happens.
Okay. But at that point in time, is it correct, Doug told you he was very concerned?
He was.
You ended up leaving then, I take it. You indicated that as well. You drove there? Is that how you got there?
Correct.
And after you left, sometime later, did you receive another message from Doug?
Yes. When I had left the house after we had talked for a little while, I left the house, I got into my car, and when I was driving home, he had called me again, probably, I would say, 4 to 5 minutes later from leaving his house.
And did he use Facebook Messenger?
Yes, he did not have my telephone number.
And what is a Facebook Messenger?
It's where you can call people if you're friends with them on Facebook, I believe, or somehow to get in touch with them.
Okay. And so you know how to use that particular...
No, I was very new at it as well. I had just put my phone number on there 2 days prior, and he was the only first person to ever call me from there.
Okay. But you did receive a phone contact then?
Yes.
And do you remember what area you were in at that point in time when you received that?
I was directly on Libel Street in front of the Chase Bank when he called me.
Okay. And at that point in time, did he ask you to do anything further?
He asked me where Dylan was.
Okay.
He asked where the baby was. At first he said, keep calling Nikki. Keep calling Nikki. Is her phone off? Keep calling her. And where's Dylan? And I'm like, he's in his room. And then he didn't go any further from there. He continued to say, keep calling her. I said, I will, just have a good night. And then I said, did you find Dylan? And he's like, oh, yeah, I have him.
Okay. So then, did you drive directly home?
Correct.
Approximately how many minutes is it from their residence to yours?
Maybe about 15.
Now, the next morning, is it correct, you both had contact back and forth, still inquiring, had you reached out to Nikki, is that correct?
Yes.
And you both had some repeated contact back and forth indicating attempts to find Nikki?
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you, Judge. How are you today, Dallas?
Okay. Hi.
Thanks. So you said you've lived in this area for roughly 5 years?
For, yes, the same extent of time, yes.
How many kids do you have?
1,
And how old is he?
4.
And where do you work now?
The Blue Opus.
And then focusing in 2016, where were you working?
Ogun Restaurant.
And you were working with Nikki then?
Correct.
And did you work anywhere else at that time?
No, I just worked there at the moment, yeah.
But you were pretty busy as a full-time mom, full-time job.
Yeah. Life.
And then you met Nikki through a mutual friend?
Yes.
And you had met Nikki 5 to 6 months before working with her?
I would say about that, yes.
And you got along pretty well with Nicky?
Instantly, yes.
Can you tell the jury some of the similar interests that you had with Nicky?
We just had children. She was a bubbly personality. We worked out, just fun activities. I don't know, just girlfriends hanging out, just being friends. Yeah.
And you knew Nicky before she met Doug?
Correct. Just a little before. I'd say a few months before.
And Nicky had become pregnant soon after she first met Doug, correct?
Correct.
Can you describe Nicky for us?
She just was a light. She's always smiling, just happy.
And you were able to connect with that? Mm-hmm. And you grew closer with her over time?
Yeah, we just shared a lot together, single parents and whatnot.
And you started to spend time together outside of work as well?
Correct, and I also would care for her children or help her out when she needed.
And it was probably nice for both you and Nicky, since you both had kids and you're able to connect in that way.
Mm-hmm. And we worked together, so just being around each other enough.
And you were able to, did you talk and confide in each other?
A little, I wouldn't say, like best friends. Not a whole lot, but we shared some things, not super deep.
Would you say that you were able to grow closer to Nicky and also get to know Dylan as well as time went on?
Yeah, for the amount that we had.
So as you started to babysit Dylan, you started to spend more time with Nicky, correct?
Yes.
And you were able to talk about life in general and relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And Nicky talked to you about her relationship with Doug?
A little, but she wasn't one to indulge in her personal life.
Sure. And you were a good listener? You listened when she talked and it helped the friendship?
Yeah. Just, yeah.
In a way you were able to be there for her and be another companion?
Sure, yeah.
But you were also able to witness her relationship with Doug firsthand.
I wouldn't say, I didn't live in the house or anything. I never really saw them together. So I wouldn't say that I could witness it entirely.
And there was times that you'd be over and you'd be with Nicky, and Doug would be present per se, but he'd actually be sleeping in his room, correct?
That was the day that I came there. That was the first time that I've ever came to her house, was the day. And he was sleeping when I had came over in the morning, yes. And still sleeping when we came back from rummage sailing, yes.
And you had babysat Dylan before that day, correct?
At my house, yes.
And how often?
In the morning, she was a substitute teacher, so whenever she had to work, it was just starting out a few times a week, twice a week, and then went to 3 or 4. She was trying to get more work, just seeing how she would adapt to Dylan having a nanny and how she would do.
Who typically dropped Dylan off?
She would.
Who typically picked up Dylan?
She would.
And then she was typically the one providing anything that Dylan would need for that day?
I would think so, yes.
Now, I want to focus specifically, you talked about that morning on, I believe that's the 20th. You and Nicky were trying to brainstorm ways to get Doug motivated.
Objection, Your Honor. Who we approach?
Nicole and Doug were working?
No, Doug wasn't
No,
working.
object on the relevancy of babysitting arrangements for this case.
How are the babysitting arrangements relevant, Attorney Shuker?
I think it goes into how Dallas is a part of this case, and
Your Honor,
I'm going to sustain on relevance grounds. I think that we've already heard a significant amount of testimony as to how she got to know Nicky, how she came to babysit. I don't think discussions that she's having along those lines adds anything. I think it's not relevant, so I'll sustain the objection.
so then, Dallas, if we could focus on the night of May 20th leading into 21st. Again, you were babysitting Dylan that night, correct?
Yes.
And that's because Nicky and Doug went to a Steel Panther concert?
Yes.
Was Nicky excited to go out that night?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you
It was
know-
a date night. It was, yeah, something to do.
And you essentially relieved Nicky's mom on that night, correct?
Yes.
And you let Nicky know that Dylan was okay on that night when you got there?
I stayed in contact with her throughout the night, yes. When I got there, when he woke up, and that was the end of our conversations, yeah.
And why did you do that?
I just felt it in me to kind of give her a heads up, like, hey, I'm here, your mom left, and then also, hey, he woke up, I fed him, I changed him and put him to bed, and I'm going to sleep. And pretty much, it's taken care of, good night, have fun.
In a way that offered some sort of reassurance to Nicky that Dylan was
For
okay?
sure, yes.
And it was pretty late that night, so I'm assuming you eventually fell asleep?
Yes, it was shortly after midnight when I sent the last message to her and I went to sleep.
And was Dylan sleeping at that time?
He was. He woke up for a brief moment, I rocked him back to sleep, fed him the rest of the bottle, and put him back in his bassinet upstairs.
And when you say upstairs, was that, do you know which room he was put in?
Their room,
And that's
the
down-
middle room, from the top of the stairs.
So then, focusing early on the morning of May 21st, I believe you woke up around 2:45 a.m.?
Correct.
What did you wake up to?
Them being extremely loud, walking into the house, just talking, repeating a phrase over and over. And I startedly woke up, I grabbed my phone, and I looked at the time right away, noticing that I had 3 missed calls from Doug and 1 message from her phone at that time.
Was that kind of startling, that loud noise?
It was, oh yeah, it was very much alarming, especially for having a baby in the house and knowing that a babysitter's there to just come in so loud and, I don't know.
And what happened next?
Doug immediately asked if I had heard from Nicky. I was confused, it's because I would hear other footsteps, and I said, isn't she with you? And he said, no, that's my friend Greg. And then he trailed in shortly after. And I was just scared because, again, I've never conversated with Doug, and I've never met Greg. So me being in their home and just her not being around, I went to grab my clothes immediately by the kitchen table. And Greg repeatedly paced back and forth in the hallway, and then went to the fridge to grab something to eat. Doug kind of chimed in with, "You're hungry?" And he grabbed a Go-Gurt at the time and ate that.
And so at that time, Greg's pacing around. What's Doug doing?
Doug is sitting in the love seat pretty much, well, it was directly across from where I was sleeping. He was sitting in the love seat. And at this time, I'm at the kitchen table, which is directly behind the love seat, attempting to grab my clothes and make my way out of the house. But I could feel that I wasn't kind of being able to go.
And then were Doug and Greg there talking about an argument that Doug had with Nicky?
Correct. They were talking about how she wanted to walk home. They just let her walk home. She wanted to walk home. She was upset. They got in an argument. Greg said he tried to calm her down. And he even grabbed Doug's phone and talked to her, but she didn't want to talk to him. And that was pretty much the end of their conversation, and the phone either had died or she had shut it off at that point.
And then Greg left around 3 a.m.?
Yes, he said he had to go.
And after Greg left, what did Doug do?
We proceeded to go over a few, just where could she be, just talking about like what happened, where is she? Yeah, so just bantering back and forth. I had thrown out a few, like, is she with her sister? Is she with, a few friends? Did she go to the next bar? Like, shouting out anything. Where could she be? I don't know. Did she walk home? Did she walk over the bridge? Did you drive that way home? I pretty much spouted everything off in my head to him, and everything kept coming back, no, 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 no. So I finally had said, is she in the trunk of your car? And he looked at me and he goes, no.
Was that a weird response?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained relevance, what she thinks. Go ahead.
You had testified earlier that Doug said he was concerned when he had arrived. Was it your interpretation when you're using the word concerned that Doug was concerned that Nicky was missing, or do you think it was that he was concerned that Nicky was with somebody else?
Objection, this is definitely Palmer speculation.
This is something that this witness is allowed to testify the way she interpreted what she testified to on direct and on that night.
She can't read a person's mind. She could just say how they appear or their demeanor.
And that's the appearance of that conversation. How did that come off? Context matters.
This might be one of those moments, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask you just briefly to go to the jury room, and we'll take this up.
All rise.
All right, let's be seated, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your patience. Please believe me when I indicate that we've been working, we conducted some important issues that had to be resolved in your absence. We've kind of dovetailed that into our other afternoon break. So believe me, I wanted to get you back out here in court earlier than I should have. So we have you here now, and we're going to bring back the witness, and we'll continue our testimony. All right, Dallas, you're doing a fine job with the microphone. I didn't remind you that you're under oath. Now, Attorney Shepard, you can reinstate your examination.
Thank you, Judge. Dallas, if we could just focus on, again, the early morning of May 21st. You testified that I believe Greg and Doug had come home roughly around 2:45 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when they came in, I believe you testified that Doug was very loud.
Correct.
His friend Greg was pacing around,
Yes.
and Doug was sitting in a love seat.
Yes.
And then Greg left pretty shortly thereafter.
Correct.
And what did Doug do next?
We sat there and talked about where she could have been, and just I kind of tried to reassure him that because she was breastfeeding, Dylan was 9 months at the time, that, she's been gone for a long time, she will be back any moment, like she's just, her boobs are probably engorged and whatnot, and she's going to come back to feed the baby, like, don't worry. So we just kind of talked about that, just, she'll be home, she should be home any moment.
And what was his general demeanor?
He just kept saying, I'm very concerned, keep calling her, I'm very concerned, like, this doesn't make sense, and yeah, I was just, I was confused. I also just didn't want to be there, and I was trying to
Your Honor, I'd
leave.
ask if you just continue your answers to the question.
The question, you're kind of going beyond what the original question was, so I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you.
You can continue to ask further questions, Attorney Shukert.
And what did you do next, and why?
After when, I'm sorry?
So I believe Doug's sitting on the love seat, and you just had the conversation. You were running through things or situations where Nicky could have been. So what did you do next?
I was grabbing my things, and while doing so, he had asked if I had a bowl to smoke.
And what does that mean?
Weed. He wanted marijuana. He had just came out and just was like, I need to relax. Do you have any marijuana on you? And I was like, actually I do.
And then what did he do?
He proceeded to smoke while sitting in the love seat, and he offered me, and I declined.
And what happened after that?
Just me trying to just be done with the night and kind of go, just like, okay, here, you do this, and I have to go. I really have to go.
And
And
then-
I proceeded to walk to the front door. I put my hand on the door handle, and he called my name out to the point of startling. Right when I was about to leave, and he had asked, he goes, Dallas. And I said, yes, Doug. And he goes, can you come back here? Can I hit that one more time? And I go, next time. And he's like, you're right, okay. And I opened the door, and I ran for my car.
And how did you feel at that point?
Just out of place, and I don't know, just an urge to get out of the house.
And then what'd you do next?
I locked my door, I looked around the cul-de-sac, it was quiet. I stared into the garage, it was open, the light was on, and I just asked, "Where are you, Nicky?"
And then you drove home?
I slowly drove down the road where the roundabout is to the police station road, which would be Hoffman, is that correct? Took a left. I drove very slowly down that road. I went down Libel Street, took a right, and then my house at the time was a few blocks down the road. So I only made 3 turns from their house to going home.
Okay, and when you were driving home, you were actively looking for Nicky while you drove home?
The streets were very quiet. It was a little after 3 in the morning. There was no cars that had passed me. There was nobody on the road.
And then when you said that you got in your car, you said you locked your doors?
I was just frightened, yeah.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect, Attorney Kerrigan Maris?
We have nothing further. We ask that you be excused. Thank you very much.
All right. Step down, Dallas. Thank you. Your next witness.
The state calls Heather Meyer.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name.
Heather Meyer.
Thank you.
And whenever you're ready, Attorney will say.
Heather, how old are you?
I'm 27.
And do you live in the Brown County area?
Yes, I do.
Are you from this area originally?
Yes.
Where'd you go to high school?
Preble High School?
Do you work at the present time?
Yes.
What type of work do you do?
I'm a dental hygienist.
How long have you worked in that field?
Dentistry, 7 years. I've been a dental hygienist for a year.
Can you tell us about your family?
Yes, I am one.
Can you move a little closer to the mic?
Sorry, I'm one of 4 siblings. I have 2 brothers and then my sister. And I have a child, and then my sister has 3 children. We're all very, very close. We're all from this area.
You said you have 2 brothers and a sister.
Yes,
Who's your sister?
Nicole Vanderheiden.
And you said that you're 27. How much older than you is Nicole?
5 years.
What name did Nicole go by primarily?
Nicky?
Heather, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 33. Can you identify what that picture is?
Yes, that is Nicky.
Prior to her death, were you close to Nicky?
I'm sorry?
Prior to her death, were you close to Nicky?
Yes.
What types of things did you like to do together?
Well, like I said, I have a child, and our children are around the same age, so we did a lot of family events during the summer. We'd always get together Tuesdays. My mom would cook. She was very active. She loved to rollerblade. She loved to take the kids out to the parks. We did that very frequently.
You have an opportunity to see Nicky interact with her kids?
Yes,
Is she a good mom?
very good mom.
I want to call your attention to May 21st of 2016. I imagine you remember that day.
Yes.
Do you recall how you initially found out that Nicky was missing?
I had received a Facebook message from Doug, say roughly around 1 or 2 o'clock that day. I was at work, and he had asked me if I had seen my sister or talked to her, and I said no. So I immediately tried calling her, and her phone was off, and we had messages back and forth, seeing if we could come to a conclusion to find her.
You said you got a Facebook message from Doug?
Correct.
Was that the typical way that you would communicate with Doug, or
I normally wouldn't communicate with Doug, We've never really talked before that.
Did Doug have your phone number that you were aware
No.
of? Perhaps explains the Facebook message.
Correct.
You indicate that there was then conversation back and forth attempting to locate Nicky.
Yes.
What did you do?
Well, I had just mentioned, call the hospitals, the jails, maybe go around to the bars, look for her around that area, just anything that we could do.
And did Doug appear receptive to those suggestions?
Yes, he did call the hospitals, he did call the jails, and he said he didn't hear from, or her name was not in any of that. I did my own research on the jail database to see if maybe she was in there. I just didn't know.
You were regularly communicating back and forth with Doug that afternoon.
Yes,
At some point in time, did you go over to Doug and Nicky's house?
I did, yes. My shift was supposed to be till 8. Obviously, I was very concerned, as was Doug, so I went over there, and we were gonna, our plan was kind of to, get pictures and start walking around just anywhere and everywhere, asking if people could have seen her.
When you arrived at Doug and Nicky's house, who was there?
It was Doug and Doug's parents.
Was Dylan there as well?
Yes,
And just to clarify, Dylan is Nicky and Doug's son?
correct.
You know how old Dylan was at that time?
6 months old.
Shortly after you arrived at Doug's, did you learn some additional information about someone's body being found?
Yes, I don't remember exactly who sent me a message. This was right before we were going to go out and look for her. We saw on the news that there had been a body found in Bellevue. And, we prayed that it wasn't her.
And this information you learned of after you got to Doug's house?
Correct.
You say that was sometime later that evening after 7 o'clock?
Yes,
And that was the first time you had heard information about a body being found?
yes.
Prior to that, did Doug or anyone else in that home communicate the same information to you, that a body had been found?
No, they didn't know. We turned on the TV together and we all saw it together.
In fact, you were planning actively to go out and look for Nicky at that time.
Correct.
When you learned about a body being found, what did you do? What happened?
Well, I got a little hysterical because, that thought is never a good feeling. And then I had called my parents to have them come over to Doug's residence just to be with us and sit together.
Did your parents come over?
Yes,
At some point in your excitement, did you injure yourself by chance?
yes, I did. Right after we saw the news, I had a nose piercing at the time, and I'd thrown my hands up on my face, and I had gotten a bloody nose.
And did your nose then start bleeding?
Yes.
What did you do after that to clean it up or to address the issue?
I took off my sweater and I tried to clean it up with some OxyClean in the lower bathroom.
Do you know if you used tissues as well on your nose?
Yes.
What type of sweater were you wearing?
It was a white and teal pink sweater.
Pink being the brand?
Correct.
And then I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 34. Can you identify what's depicted in that picture?
Yes.
What is it?
It is my sweater sitting on the counter sink with a blood stain on the sleeve.
And when you say it's in the sink, where is that located?
On the counter sink in the bathroom?
At Mr. Dietrich's house?
Correct.
You know what floor that's located on?
The first level.
And then I think you barely depict on the right side of the photo, is there a cleaning agent that's in there?
Yes, there's a little portion of a bottle of OxyClean.
And is it true you had attempted to use the OxyClean to clean up the sweatshirt?
Correct.
You recall if you took that sweatshirt with you from the residence later that night on the 21st?
I forgot it there.
some point that scene became rather chaotic later that night.
Yes.
Your Honor, I would like to offer for admission Exhibits 33 and 34.
Subject to cross, any objection to 33 and 34?
No.
33 and 34 are received.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Attorney Stebbins.
Thank you for your time today. I just have a few more brief questions. You just testified that you went over to Doug's house upon hearing all this news. The family went over there, and Doug was Nicole's boyfriend at the time.
Correct.
How long had they been dating? Approximately.
About a year and a half,
Okay.
maybe a little less.
Okay. And you said that you were close with Nicole.
Yes.
I think you said Tuesday you went over to your mom's house.
Yes.
Okay. In addition to just you and her, did you and the rest of your family hang out often?
Yes.
Okay. When I say often, and you say yes, what is often?
It would have been every Tuesday, and we would get together on weekends once in a while with my mother and father and all the children and do activities.
So very close.
Yes.
Every Tuesday and every weekend?
Not every,
Well,
majority, yes.
as much as possible?
Yes.
Okay. Did Doug come over every week to your mom's house on Tuesdays?
No.
Did he ever?
Maybe once, but I don't really recall.
What about on the weekends? Was he always around for that?
No.
Going back to when you started communicating with Doug on the Saturday, what time did you say you think he got a hold of you, or you got a hold of him?
It would have been anywhere from noon to 2 o'clock, I believe.
Okay. Prior to you speaking with him, were you alerted to Nicole's, I don't want to say disappearance, but her not returning home from the babysitter the previous night?
No, I was not.
So did the babysitter get a hold of you before or after Doug?
After?
Okay. Do you know approximately how long after, or was it kind of simultaneous?
I don't recall.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, Courtney. If you just come up to the witness stand, and Jody will swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Courtney Gerlikowski, Gerlikowski.
Thank you.
Be seated and just kind of get close to the microphone, and whenever you're ready, Attorney Saunders.
Good afternoon, Courtney.
Okay.
Can you let us know how you're currently employed?
I'm a registered nurse.
And where do you work?
I work at Door County Medical Center.
How long have you worked at that specific?
I just started last week.
Okay. Do you have other prior experience as a nurse?
Yes.
For about how long?
I've been in 10, 11 years.
And throughout those years, you worked at other medical facilities?
Yes.
Are you a resident of the area?
I just moved to Door County, so
Well, along with your new job?
yes.
Where did you live prior to that?
In Green Bay.
Back in May of 2016, did you also live in Green Bay at that time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you know an individual known as Douglas Dietrich?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know Doug?
I went to middle school and high school with him, an acquaintance friend.
And not to put a number on it, but can you say approximately how long you've known Doug then?
Like 20 plus years.
Okay. And how do you describe your relationship with Doug?
Acquaintance, not a close friend, but an acquaintance friend. Would hang out every once in a while.
Can you say approximately how often you would hang out with Doug?
It was more when I was in my younger 20s, but in the last couple of years, anywhere from 1 to 5 times a year, maybe.
Okay. And do you also know an individual known as Nicole Vanderheiden?
Yes,
And how do you know Nikki?
through Doug Dietrich.
Can you describe that interaction?
I met her just a few times. Didn't have a lot of interaction with her. Just knew that she was dating Doug. But Doug and I aren't in the same close circle all the time, so I didn't see him that often. I heard of her and knew of her, but I'd only met her 2, maybe 3 times at the most.
And was one of those instances May 20th of 2016?
Yes.
And what was the reason you had contact with Nikki on that night?
Group of friends, we had all went to a concert at the watering hole together, and they were there.
Do you remember who was playing, which bands were playing?
It was the Steel Panther band. And I think the opening band was Annex.
Okay. And were there other individuals at the concert with you in addition to Nikki and Doug?
Yes.
Do you remember who those were?
Yes. Do you want me to name all of them?
If you can.
Sure. Crystal Kane, Angela Delphos, Aaron Kalinsky, Darcy Lipsky, Douglas Dietrich, Nicole Vanderheiden, Jesse Barakashan, Mike Gillespie, Sean Gohagan, Sarah Gohagan. I feel like I might be missing someone, but
That's perfect, thank you. Did you all arrive at the concert together?
not all of us, no.
Can you describe how you got to the concert that night?
I had met some friends at my friend Angela's house prior, and then a bunch of us rode there. And Doug and Nicky were not there, or they didn't go with us. We met them there later that night.
They arrived later on
Yeah.
than when you arrived?
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember approximately what time you got to the concert?
I think around like 7:30.
Okay. And what about Doug and Nikki? Do you recall what time they got there?
I don't recall the time, but it was before the concert had started.
Okay. And the concert starts. Can you describe the general atmosphere at that time within your group?
We were just having fun, drinking, singing along to the band, having a good time.
Did you, on that night, personally observe the interaction between Doug and Nikki?
Yes, briefly.
Okay. Can you describe that for us?
It was the same, just having fun, singing, dancing with the band.
Did you observe any argument
No,
between the two? Did you observe any fight between the two?
no,
So sounds like a typical concert. Is that correct?
yes,
And did you stay at the watering hole all night?
no.
Do you recall approximately when you left the watering hole?
We left shortly after the concert was done, maybe around 11.
And where did you leave to?
We left and went to the sardine can.
And can you describe we in that sentence? Who all went with you?
Oh, my friend Jesse, Crystal, Angela, Aaron, Darcy, and Nikki, and myself.
So Doug did not go with you to the sardine can, is that right?
He did not know.
Do you know why?
When the concert was done, there was a lot of people, it was crowded. We were kind of sitting there deciding where we wanted to go, what we wanted to do after the concert, because we knew we didn't want to stay there. And we didn't know exactly where Doug was. We briefly looked, it was just so crowded. We decided to go and thought we would just text him and let him know where we went.
And was the plan ultimately that you would all congregate at the sardine can?
Yes.
Eventually that night?
Yes.
In the car ride Did you have a chance to observe Nikki's demeanor?
Yes.
Can you describe that for us?
She was drunk, feeling good, kind of happy, and I don't know, that's about it.
Okay. And once you all get to the sardine can, were people continuing to drink at that point?
Yes.
Similar to the watering hole, was everyone having a good time?
Yes.
And approximately what time did you leave the sardine can on that night?
I left around 12:20 in the morning.
And how did you leave?
I took an Uber home.
When you left, had Doug arrived to the sardine can
No.
by that point?
No.
At the sardine can, were you able to observe Nikki's demeanor?
Yes.
And how would you describe that?
She was, like I said, a little bit intoxicated, having a good time, dancing, and I don't know, kind of hanging on your shoulder.
Okay. And again, by the time you left, Doug had not arrived.
That's correct.
And last question, sorry. When you left, Nikki was still at the sardine can?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Judge. So who was playing? It was Steel Panther?
Yes.
How was the concert?
It was good.
It was good? And you guys had a pretty big group there, correct?
Yes.
I think we tried to name all of them, but I have your statement right in front of me, so I can help lead you. So there was Crystal Kane, Angela Delphos, Jesse Barakshan, Aaron Kalinsky, Darcy Lipsky, Doug Dietrich, Sean Geohagen, Sarah Geohagen, Greg Matthew, Mike Gillespie, and Nikki. So that's 11 total, right?
Yes.
And that's a pretty big group at that concert?
Yes.
And then as the night progressed and you got to the end of the concert, I believe Sean and Sarah actually left before the concert was over or right after?
Yes.
So of your main group of 11, 2 left and you knew that they had left.
Yes.
So then there's 9 people left. And of the 9 people left, everybody was together. Everybody knew where they were except Doug and Greg were missing.
They weren't missing. There was a lot of people, and we figured they were up in the bar inside, and it was just so crowded to try and even get in there.
Sure. And you couldn't get a hold of them either?
I don't have their phone numbers.
Could anybody in the group get a hold of them?
Not that I'm aware of.
And then on your way from the watering hole to the sardine can, you were able to observe how Nikki was feeling?
Yes.
And you said she was feeling good and feeling happy?
Yeah. Like someone who was intoxicated. Yeah.
Okay. And then she was the same way at the sardine can?
Yes.
Do you remember how long you were actually at the sardine can?
An hour at the most.
Do you remember how long the drive was from the watering hole to the sardine can?
5-10 minutes.
And after you left the watering hole until you left the sardine can, you never saw Doug and Greg Matthew again, correct?
No.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
No further questions, Your Honor. I would ask Ms. Gerlikowski to be excused.
She's excused. Courtney, thank you. You may step down. Your next witness?
The next witness, I anticipate being a little bit longer. It's Sergeant Holzbach. I would like to call her today if we could run a little bit late, if no one has concerns. State will call Sergeant Holzbach.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Tracy Holschbach, Holschbach.
Thank you.
Walshbach, you may be seated. Use the mic. And whenever you're ready, Attorney Lassay.
Sergeant Holzbach, can you state for the record how you are employed?
I am employed with the Round County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your current rank with the Sheriff's Office?
I am currently a sergeant investigator. My primary duties are internet crimes against children, but I do help out with various other investigations.
How long have you been with the Sheriff's Office?
Since July of 2003.
And how long have you been with the investigative unit?
Since May of 2014.
You now are Sergeant Tracy Holzbach. Prior to that, did you go by a different name?
Yeah, my maiden name was Steffens.
Well, since this case began, you married and have a name change.
That is correct.
So if we see the name Steffens, or if that's referenced on a report or something, that is you, it's just your maiden name.
That is correct.
Were you working in your capacity as an investigator with the Brown County Sheriff's Office on May 21st of 2016?
Yes, I was.
And at some point, did you get involved in the investigation of a deceased female in a field off of Hoffman Road?
Yes, I was actually on a day off. It was a Saturday afternoon, and received a call in from Lieutenant James Valley for a request to assist with the investigation.
Do you recall about what time you were called on?
I was called at approximately 2:30 p.m. My commute is a little further out, so I actually didn't get to the sheriff's office until approximately 3:30, and then ultimately to the scene at approximately 3:42.
And when you arrived on the scene, what was your task?
I was advised by Lieutenant Valley that there were witnesses that actually located the deceased female, and I was directed to obtain a statement from a gentleman named Mr. Richard Vanderheiden in reference to his observations and then his call into the 911 Communications Center.
After taking the statement from Mr. Vanderheiden, what was your next assignment?
I concluded that statement at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, and then I was advised by Lieutenant James Valley that there was a missing persons report being reported nearby at 2329 Berkeley Road in the town of Ledgeview, and I was directed, along with, at that time, Officer Mark Shield, to respond to that residence to obtain the missing persons report.
When you say nearby, do you know about how close 2329 Berkeley Road is to the location where the young lady's body was found?
My approximation would be within probably 3 miles.
And when you received that dispatch, or when that information came in, you and Officer Shield made preparations to go to that address?
That's correct.
Did you do anything to prepare yourself other than simply drive over there?
So initially, my arrival at the crime scene on Hoffman Road, I didn't enter the crime scene. I obtained the statement from Mr. Vanderheiden, but I was made aware of somewhat of a physical description of the deceased female. I was actually provided a handful of photos. They were not close-up photos, but they were photos that I was able to determine that, with the information that was provided to me, that it was a deceased female, female white, and then I was able to observe the female was wearing a pink, like a liquor bracelet, like if you're out, they would use these bracelets to identify that you're of age to be able to drink any sort of alcohol. So I took that information with me upon responding to Doug and Nicole's residence on Berkeley.
So prior to your arrival at the address where Doug and Nicole lived, you were obviously aware that the deceased female who was found was at least consistent with the description of the missing person.
That is correct.
When you arrived at the Berkeley Road residence, what did you do?
I activated a audio and visual recorder. Myself and Officer Shield arrived at approximately 5:12 is when I actually activated the digital and the video and audio recorder. I made contact at the front door. I asked to speak with Doug. I believe Mr. Greg Matthew answered the door at that time, and I was directed to Doug Dietrich, who was actually descending from an upstairs level. And then I was escorted into a kitchen/dining room area. It's an open concept dwelling. And then I asked to take a seat at the kitchen table so I could obtain information in reference to the missing person that he was reporting.
You were invited into the residence?
I was invited into the residence.
You indicated that you had a sort of a key fob recorder. Did you make Mr. Dietrich aware that you were recording the conversation?
No, I did not.
When you arrived at the residence, who was present?
Greg Matthew met me at the door, and he was verbally identified. Upon entering the residence, I observed a middle-aged female who identified herself as Doug's mom, Diane. Upon walking into the kitchen area, I observed a middle-aged male holding an infant, and he was identified verbally as Robert Dietrich, and then the infant was identified to me as Dylan Dietrich, and then, of course, Doug.
Upon entry into the home and meeting with Doug, did you have an opportunity to view Doug's physical appearance?
Yeah, so when Doug descended actually down from the stairs, he looked very pale. To be blunt, he looked really hungover. He looked like he was pretty sleep deprived. He had bags under his eyes. His eyes were like dark gray, and he had a really pale face. I did not observe any sort of scratches, marks of any sort on his arms or hands. He was wearing like a bright colored polo shirt. I guess describe it as like an aqua or royal blue polo shirt with cargo shorts. I didn't observe anything on his legs between his knees and his socks that he was wearing. I didn't observe any injuries on him.
So he was wearing shorts and a short sleeve shirt.
That is correct.
Did you notice if Doug was wearing anything else?
Excuse me. He was wearing a Fitbit on his left hand, and then he just had his phone on his persons that he was referencing throughout our conversation, throughout the evening.
Did you observe if his Fitbit device remained on his wrist during your entire interaction with him?
Yes.
And you did indicate that this conversation that you had with Mr. Dietrich was recorded using the key fob?
That is correct. It did exhaust due to the amount of time I was at the residence. The key fob began at approximately 5:12 and then would have ended shortly before 8 p.m. just because the battery life of the key fob isn't forever. It died.
About how long were you at the residence?
I left the residence shortly after 8 p.m. after obtaining a written statement from Mr. Dietrich.
So you were there for 2 hours and 45 minutes roughly? Mm-hmm. And that was an entirely consensual encounter with Mr. Dietrich?
Very much so.
Can you describe his demeanor?
Yeah, so Doug was, I think initially, as the contact continued, I think that he appeared, initially I think he was baffled by the fact that he just couldn't find Nicole and that it was, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening and he still wasn't hearing from her. I think that the worry appeared to be setting in, as the conversation between he and I continued. He didn't express to me in any way, shape, or form that he was worried, but other than the fact that it didn't make sense for her not to be home. I mean, she was a mother that was caring for an infant. She was breastfeeding a child and or pumping for a baby. So it was concerning to him that, as he expressed to me, that it didn't make sense that she wasn't there.
Sergeant, before I get to the exhibits, I'll get those in a second. You obviously mentioned that you were aware that a deceased female had been found. Did you share that information with Mr. Dietrich at all during your interaction?
Not at all. I never alluded to it.
Is it fair to say that when you went over there, you knew that there was a female who was deceased and that she matched the description, and that Mr. Dietrich was the person who lived with her? This wasn't your typical missing persons report from your perspective, is that fair?
That is correct. I was on a fact-finding mission. It was not an interrogation. However, I knew at that time I needed to find out every single detail possible. We also were not able to identify the female due to her injuries. So I was doing everything I could to attempt to make an identification or attempt an identification through the process that I had with my conversation with Mr. Dietrich.
Had you taken missing person reports in the past?
Yes.
Fair to say this was a lot more detailed than the average missing person report?
That is correct.
I will show you what have been marked as exhibits, I believe 35, 36, and 37. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you identify those photographs?
So these would have been photographs. These are actually still shots of the video recording interview that I had with Doug Dietrich on 5/21 of 16.
And there's a timestamp on each of those. Do you know if that timestamp is accurate?
This timestamp is actually 1 hour off due to I didn't reset my key fob for daylight savings. I didn't account for it. So on these photos, you're going to see on Exhibit 35, it says 16:38. The actual time would have been 1 hour ahead of that, so 17:38. So instead of 4:38 in the afternoon, it was actually 5:38.
And that's military time?
That is correct.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of those exhibits and request permission to publish via the projector.
Those exhibits are 35 through what?
37.
Any objection subject to cross to 35, 36, and 37?
No, Your Honor.
35, 36, and 37 are received.
Sergeant, which exhibit is depicted on the overhead now?
This appears to be Exhibit number 35.
And could you describe what you see in that photograph?
So I know I was seated to the immediate left. You can see a piece of paper. I'm actually seated at the kitchen table. The recorder is sitting on a book that I use for taking notes, and it's peering at Doug Dietrich as he stands there. There's a clear visual shot of his arms and his hands. I should say his right arm, right hand, and then left arm, where I do not see any sort of visible injuries on him.
In the next photograph, which number is this?
This would be Exhibit number 37.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 37?
This is at the point where I'm sitting down reading a written statement that Doug and I had wrote, and this is Doug Dietrich sitting at the table as I'm finishing up the statement, or in the process of showing him the written statement so that he can conclude that it's accurate. This would be his left arm, his left hand. He's wearing a Fitbit, and again, no visible injuries on his persons.
The knuckles look a little bit darker. Did you observe any actual injuries on the knuckle, or is that potentially affected by the photograph here?
I did not view any sort of injuries on him. I do believe this is probably a result of some sort of shadowing, the way the recorder was seated or positioned.
And again, you were at least somewhat suspicious when you entered this scene, and you were looking for any potential injuries.
Correct. Like you stated earlier, this was not a typical missing persons report. I knew that there had been the ability for this to be something more.
In the next photograph, which I believe will be Exhibit 36.
That's correct.
Can you indicate what's depicted in that photograph?
This is Doug Dietrich. He's actually seated at the kitchen table, both hands visible. I don't recall at this point what he was doing on his phone, but I know that this was the point where he and I were going over some sort of statement. And again, I don't see any visible injuries on either of his hands.
When you were asking questions of Mr. Dietrich, was he openly offering and volunteering information to you?
Yeah, he was very cooperative. There were some things that he had holes in that I think, in my opinion, Mr. Matthew was able to fill in some of those discrepancies with his lack of recollection. But he was very forthcoming, cooperative. I asked him to see his phone at one point, and he had no problem showing me his cell phone.
In fact, at the end of the interview, did you ask for consent to download the cell phone?
I did. I asked for written consent to have our forensic analyst download his phone, which he complied with, gave me written consent, at which time I then provided it to a patrol officer, Deputy Doug Dow, who transported it to the sheriff's office for analyzation.
And was he using the phone periodically to assist him in answering your questions?
Yes.
Attempting to piece together a timeline of what happened?
Yes.
I specifically asked him for times that he would have last spoken with Nicole, and he provided me those times by use of his cell phone to recollect.
You indicated that for the most part, the statement took place around the kitchen table, which is depicted in those photographs. At some point, were you also allowed to look at other areas of the residence at that time?
Yeah, I actually asked and inquired if Nicole had a vehicle. He said that the vehicle was in the garage. At this point, he escorted me towards the garage. We viewed the vehicle. I viewed the vehicle personally in the garage, peered into the car, observed nothing that I saw in the car, specifically Nicole, who was the person that we were looking for. And then he escorted us back into, it was actually myself and Officer Shield, and then he escorted us back into the kitchen area.
Do you recall what other parts of the home were visible to you during the time that you were there?
I would have been able to see the open concept kitchen, dining room, and then there was a living room. They were all kind of connected without any sort of barriers. In my walk to the garage, there was a laundry room, in a hallway, in a bathroom. I did not go into either of those rooms, but I would have seen them, and then the open staircase. There's also attached to the kitchen was some sort of office area, I think, but I wasn't able to go, I did not go into that room.
You did not conduct a full search of the residence, but is it fair to say that in the rooms that you were able to observe, you were looking for anything that might be evidence of a crime or suspicious situation?
Right, there was nothing that drew my attention.
What was the overall condition of the home, if you recall?
In good condition. I recall there might have been a couple laundry baskets, maybe of clothing, in the living room area, but it was a well-kept home.
Did you notice any odor when you were in the residence at all?
No.
So again, is that something that if you had observed, you would have noted?
That is correct.
And you indicate that you finished up your statement with Doug and left that scene at approximately 8 p.m.?
Yep, shortly thereafter.
Did you have an opportunity later that evening to return to the residence of Doug and Nicole?
Yes, I actually received a telephone call from Lieutenant Valley requesting that I meet Detective Lee Kingston from the Green Bay Police Department and Deputy Jason Caters at a local Purveyor site not too far away from the Berkeley Road address. I did have a good rapport with Doug. I had spent a significant amount of time with him and in conversing with him. So I was asked to meet with with Caters and Kingston to make contact with Doug to see if Doug would come to the sheriff's office for an interview. And I think we arrived at his house around 11:45-ish. I made contact with Doug. He came outside as I asked him to step out of the house so that we could have a conversation without, others hearing, I guess. And he was very willing to come to the sheriff's office and had no problem coming down to the sheriff's office with us.
And at that point, when you returned to the residence at approximately 11:45 p.m., is it fair to say that you're no longer interested in really a missing persons report, at least from the investigative standpoint?
That's correct.
This was more of a situation where officers wanted to do a more complete interrogation of Doug?
That is correct.
And you indicated he did, despite that, come willingly to the sheriff's office at 11:45 p.m.?
Yes.
And you transported him there?
Yeah, and prior to actually leaving, Doug's mother stepped out and asked that I step in and speak with Nicole's family as they were in the residence. And Doug had no issues. We all of us, Detective Kingston, Officer Caters, myself, and Doug all re-entered the house. And at that time, I did have a brief conversation with the Meyer family that was present.
Smell any odors or make any observations of evidentiary value upon your return to the residence at 11:45 p.m. that night?
No, there's nothing at all that stood out to me. Nothing that caught my sense or in any way, shape, or form.
you have further involvement with this investigation on May 23rd of 2016?
Yes, I did. At approximately 2 p.m., I assisted our forensic analyst with recovering video surveillance from the watering hole. I returned to the sheriff's office at approximately 6 p.m., or was on my way back to the sheriff's office at 6 p.m. And then I was notified by Lieutenant Valley that there was a crime scene in front of 2329 Berkeley Road, and was actually directed to assist in the respond to that crime scene.
What was your role in responding to the crime scene on?
I was directed at that time that we would be going and speaking with Mr. Dietrich, and at that time myself, Sergeant Slinger, Lieutenant White, I made a telephone call to Doug and asked him where he was. At that time he advised me that he was at his parents' house on Euro Lane. I then drove Sergeant Slinger and Lieutenant White to that Euro Lane address where we made contact with Doug and Doug's mom.
And was Doug taken into custody on?
Yes, I actually made contact at the door. I asked Doug to step outside at that time. Sergeant Slinger and Lieutenant White took Doug into custody while I spoke with Diane on the inside of the residence.
Were you present during the transport of Mr. Dietrich on the 23rd?
Yeah, I would have been driving to the jail.
Given that you were driving, you probably couldn't view Mr. Dietrich, but were you able to observe the interactions between Mr. Dietrich and the other officers?
I wasn't able to see specifically because I was driving and he was, seated in the back seat, but I could tell by his emotions that he was very emotional. He's in a very emotional state.
Was that the end of your involvement with the case on the 23rd?
Yes.
And then did you continue and assist in any other aspects of the case on May 24th, 2016?
Yes, on May 24th, at approximately 11 a.m., myself and investigators from the Brown County Sheriff's Office arrived at Berkeley Road at 2329 as we were advised that there was a search warrant that was going to be conducted at the residence. At that time, I was directed by Lieutenant Valley to kind of serve as like a liaison. The Wisconsin State Crime Lab was there, and they were going to be performing luminol tests throughout the residence. Lieutenant Valley made the walkthrough with Bob Ertl, I believe, was the gentleman that was performing the luminol tests, and would have directed him to the locations that would have required the luminol. And then Bob and I just made a plan as far as how the house would be searched from there on out, and then other investigators, including myself, actually completed the search.
Did you serve as the evidence custodian during that search?
No.
You know who did?
Deputy Mark Shield. I did recover some evidence, but then that evidence would have been turned over to the evidence custodian, which is common practice.
And prior to any evidence being recovered, would it have been photographed and then removed in accordance with your protocols?
That's correct.
It appeared that the investigators were all wearing gloves, everyone involved in the search warrant?
That's correct.
And again, everything properly executed based on your training and experience?
Yes.
Did you in fact assist with the collection of some electronic items from the house as well?
Yes, I did. A couple of cell phones, tablets, laptop. I recovered Doug's, the shirt that he was wearing on the 21st when the blue polo or the aqua polo, and then that would have all been turned over to the evidence custodian.
No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Judge. So Sergeant Hulschbach, I want to go all the way back to the start of where the drugs started. So you were called to the Brown County Sheriff Office around 2:45 p.m.?
I was called at approximately 2:30, and I got to the ultimate Hoffman Road scene at approximately 3:45.
And you met with Sergeant Lopnow and Lieutenant Valley?
Correct.
And then you drove to that initial scene where the body was found?
I stayed on the roadway, but I was at that scene, correct.
And did you drive your own vehicle?
Work vehicle, a minivan for a detective vehicle, yeah.
Sure. And that road at that time, that was blocked off?
It would have been blocked off. I don't recall exactly the points where it was blocked off, but I believe it was East River and Bellevue Street. I would have had to get through a point, yes.
Sure, and there's a lot of cars there at that time.
I don't recall how many cars were there. I know there was patrol deputies there. I know that upon my immediate arrival, I was directed immediately to start taking the statement from the witness.
And how long did that take again?
I think I started the statement at approximately 3:56-ish, and it lasted till about 4:30. So I would have taken the statement outside of a vehicle. I used an iPad to take the statement, so I would have used the iPad or the top of a vehicle to type on.
And then sometime after that was when you were informed that there was a missing persons report?
That's correct. I finished, like I said, the statement around 4:30. It was probably within 15 minutes that definitely within 15 minutes that I was informed that I needed to respond to 2329 Berkeley Road.
So just to establish a timeline, that missing person report came after Hoffman Road would have been blocked off with that police presence?
The missing person came in at 4:37, and from what I recall, the call where the nude female laying in the, I think that came in at like 1:55-ish, before 2 o'clock.
So the missing person report came in after?
That's correct.
And then you responded to 2329 Berkeley Road?
That's correct.
And do you know, was the caller for the missing person report, was that Doug Dietrich?
I believe it was, yes.
And the missing person at that time being reported missing was Nicole Vanderheiden?
That is correct.
And when you arrived, you talked a little bit about Doug's physical appearance, and you were able to note that right away?
Yeah. I believe I also noted it right in my details.
You did, and that's what I intend to go over. So you noted that Doug appeared to have been up all night, correct?
Correct.
His eyes were sunk in his head with dark gray and black bags under his eyes?
Correct.
He looked very sleep deprived?
Correct.
And his face was very pale?
Correct.
And then you testified and you explained today and in your report that while you were taking that missing persons report, Doug's friend Greg would have to interject?
That's correct.
And it appeared like Doug didn't necessarily have all the information?
That's correct.
And then in your report, you noted that there were multiple times where Doug was almost stuttering and almost to the point where Greg would have to take over for him?
Yes.
Based on your training and experience, did you draw any opinions from that?
My opinion at the time was either he's completely lapsed in judgment or has absolutely no clue what happened. And I felt that Greg interjecting was him interjecting because he was with Doug, and I had no reason not to believe that he wasn't with him. So he was either severely confused or he just didn't know because he had too much alcohol.
What about all the stuttering that you noted?
He just couldn't answer the question. So if I had a question, it was and I don't think every time Greg actually was able to finish, I think that was just how Doug spoke.
As you were taking this missing persons report, were you able to learn that Doug and Nicky had been in a fight the night prior?
So in my conversation with Doug, he indicated that there was not an argument at the watering hole, but that argument would have started up. She would have left mad. He did show me a text message that he sent her, or she sent him, I'm sorry, and that there was a verbal argument on the telephone. I don't recall if it was the 12:15 or the 12:36 phone call, but there was 3 phone calls made to her by Doug. I didn't specify, nor did I ask which phone call caused the argument or which one that she was irate in, but Greg Matthew did indicate that he did take the phone from Doug in attempt to interject, and she was
she was pretty hysterical. She was upset.
So focusing just on the text messages that you mentioned, and to set the scene a little bit, so you're there for a missing persons report at the address that is 3 miles from a body that was found. Was there anything about those text messages, based on your training and experience, that led you to investigate those text messages further?
Well, we would have asked for consent, like was stated earlier. Yeah, without a doubt, we still at this point had no idea. We couldn't find Nicole. We were not able to identify, the person that was deceased. And it's very common in an investigation like this that when you're interviewing or you're discussing something with somebody, you're going to look at somebody that's close to the victim or close to the person that's missing. So it definitely drew attention, which is why we asked for the consent dump of the phone.
And to be fair, one of those text messages actually said, "You're an abusive asshole," correct?
Correct.
And was that cause for concern for you?
Right, which is why we requested the dump of the phone.
Did Doug ever tell you during the missing person report that he snorted amphetamines the night before?
Not at all.
Did he tell you that he had smoked weed the night before?
Not at all. I actually don't think I even asked him how much alcohol he had. I asked how much Nicole had.
And then, since that text message was concerning to you, did you follow up with Doug?
As far as, I asked him, I think, why is she calling you an abusive asshole? And then he indicated sometimes, she gets that way if she drinks or if she gets something in her head. And then I do believe I asked him if he's ever been physical with her, and he said absolutely not.
Yeah, I believe the exact quote in your report.
I'm going to object at this point. I know there's been a number of different questions eliciting hearsay, and hearsay has been responded to. Nonetheless, all of these statements are still hearsay. That there's no exception. Doug Dietrich is not the defendant in this case. There is an exception for that. And frankly, Mr. Dietrich is going to be available and be a witness in this case and can be asked about those statements himself.
Could I have the attorney's approach for a second?
When you challenged him about, or questioned him about those text messages, what was his general demeanor in response? Not what he said, but what was his demeanor?
Just kind of like, I don't know, like she gets these things in her head. He was trying to justify why, why she says that stuff about him. His demeanor was defensive, I guess you could say. Like, I don't know why she says this stuff. She gets it in her head.
And then later on during your interview, you actually asked if they had checked for Nikki in the vehicle or in her vehicle in the garage?
Correct.
And then you went to the garage to look?
That's correct.
Had Doug looked there yet?
I don't think I asked him if he looked in the car, or maybe I did, and actually, you know what he did? He did say he went and grabbed a baby bag, but I don't know if he did a thorough search, and then at that point, I was like, well, maybe we should look, just in case.
And when you went and checked on the garage, you actually specifically noted that Doug stood in front of the vehicle and monitored your actions closely, correct?
That's correct.
Did you ask Doug if he had, or in your investigation, did did Doug check the basement at all?
Yes, actually, while I was present, he would have checked the basement, storage rooms and stuff like that. I did not go with him when he did that.
And you noted that when that discussion was happening about whether or not he checked downstairs, you noted that Doug seemed nervous when he answered those questions.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
And then you were still part of this investigation on May 23rd?
Correct.
And you indicated that you were present ultimately when Doug Dietrich was taken into custody?
I would have stepped in the house when the handcuffs would have actually been placed on him, and when he was told he was being placed under arrest. I was actually speaking with Doug's mother, Diane. I was physically there, but I was inside the house when that actual arrest occurrence occurred, and then I transported with Sergeant Slinger and Lieutenant White.
So you knew he was in custody at that point?
Yeah, because Sergeant Slinger actually opened the door and stated that he was being taken into custody.
And you transported him then to the Brown County Jail?
That's correct.
And then what specifically was Doug under arrest for?
At that time, it was first-degree intentional homicide.
Of Nicole Vanderheiden?
That's correct.
I have no further questions, Judge.
Redirect.
You were asked some questions about the text messages that you looked at on Doug's phone. Did Doug voluntarily show you those text messages?
Yes.
Did he appear to make any attempt to hide them from you or delete them or get rid of them?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, he showed me the text message that I was inquiring about was, Nicole had stated to him, "What bitch are you with?" And then I was able to observe the second text, which was what I was being questioned on, and he had no problem showing me that device and showing me what she had texted him.
Your job with the Brown County Sheriff's Office now is an investigator, correct?
Correct.
You understand that not all investigations are completed at time of arrest?
That's correct.
In fact, in this case, despite the fact that Doug was placed under arrest on March 23rd, the investigation was ongoing at that time, was it not?
Very much so.
Judge, may we approach?
Come forward. We just needed to clarify something on our sidebar, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead, Attorney Lassay, with any other redirect.
Just to clarify, you were aware that as of May 24th, the day after Doug was arrested, that the investigation remained ongoing?
Yes,
In fact, you participated on the 24th in follow-up investigation.
that's correct.
But after the 24th of May 2016, you really weren't directly involved in further investigation of this case.
That is correct.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Any recross? Attorney Schuchert.
I have no further questions.
Officer Holzbach, thank you. You may step down.
We ask that you be excused, Your Honor.
She is excused. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about 10 after 5. I think you've ended up having a pretty full day today. We'll reconvene again tomorrow at 8:30. Again, do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't read or try to find out any accounts regarding this case through any other media source. Have a good evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 8:30.
All rise.